I'm Paul Heslop. I'm the Senior Technical Advisor to the Resident Coordinator and the UN country team in Ukraine. I'm based in Kyiv. I've been working there for about 18 months. I have 30 years experience in the sector, and I am finding Ukraine to be one of the most interesting and challenging positions I've held in the last 30 years. I think what is unique about Ukraine is not the different challenges that we face, whether these are deep buried bombs, these glide bombs that are coming in fast and hard and maybe not detonating and then ended up 10, 15 meters underground. It's not the use of booby traps in an urban area. It's not the denial of large areas of agricultural land. It's not patterned minefields. It's not the use of scatterable minefields or cluster munitions. We've seen that before in other countries. What we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War is the scale, the complexity, and the overlapping nature of these different threats. So we're seeing literally millions of mines being used in under 1,000 days. The conflict started around 1,000 days ago. If you say 5,000 mines a day laid, that's actually 5 million mines now have been laid in Ukraine in the last 1,000 days. If you're saying 10,000 artillery shells are fired a day and 10% fail, that's 1 million artillery shells that have unexploded. So you can see very quickly the scale of the problem is growing almost exponentially. I think also what we've got in Ukraine that is different to the other countries that I've worked in is you have the areas that are perceived to be contaminated and are contaminated are very, very heavily contaminated. And we haven't seen contamination like that since the First or Second World War. But that also means that there is a lot of area that is suspected of being contaminated that was either briefly occupied or, for whatever reason is suspected. But that has very low density minefields or even no mines at all. And that presents a different challenge, which is, you're clearing thousands and thousands of square meters and not finding anything. So, although both of these are mine action problems, one is very technical and very expensive because there is a problem, and one is very technical and inefficient because there actually isn't the problem that people perceive. And so how do we work to achieve results that solve both of those problems in the most cost-effective way? And one of the things I'm very concerned about in Ukraine is, although the international community has been incredibly generous so far, we've seen over $1 billion pledged to Ukraine in the last 2 years, just for mine action, which is a fantastic result. And I think, the international community has really come together on this. But there is only so much money that the international community can provide. And, there are other emergencies around the world. So at some point, some of the responsibility for this is going to get transferred to the Ukrainian government, and realistically that means they're going to have to borrow the money to pay for it. So that is an ever increasing debt. So that, the more efficient and the more effective we can make demining today, the less debt that Ukraine will have to incur to clean this problem up over the next 10, 15, 20 years. So I'm now very focused on working with the Ukrainian authorities, with the different implementing partners, the different clearance organizations, to ensure that every square meter we clear is a meter that is contaminated, but also a meter that when it's being cleared will have a positive impact. Will we see a school being built? Will we see a hospital being reconstructed? Will it allow a bridge to be built, or repair to the energy infrastructure, or a new power transformer to be installed? So every task we do has to have impact and has to have an outcome. It can't just be about outputs. It's no longer how many mines have we cleared or how many 1,000 square meters or dollars per square meter. It's got to be, how is that land used afterwards? Have homes been reconstructed? Are we seeing green energy projects being implemented? Are we seeing dramatic reductions in casualties? So everything's got to have an outcome, which then leads me on to, how can we use new technologies? Ukraine is full of innovation. We're seeing use of drones, underwater drones, UAVs, robotic dogs, little robots with different sensors on it, using microwave, infrared technology, ultraviolets, different magnetometers, different magnetic signals or radiological elements, combining that with very high-powered computers and then AI interpreting the results. We're looking at projects at the moment where even if there is a tiny part of the mine or the bomb exposed, using a high-resolution camera linked to AI, will immediately identify that as a possible threat and draw the attention to a human operator who can then evaluate it. And that will hopefully again save lots of time in terms of survey, trying to mark a threat, trying to understand where the threats are, identifying patterns of whether it's for mines or artillery strikes, cluster strikes, which will make us more and more effective, reducing cost to the Ukrainian people, and ultimately saving lives as well as money. According to government figures, there are 139,000 square kilometres of land that is suspected. But again, I think we're probably saying the front line, which is around 1,000 kilometres long and 5 kilometres deep, probably has the vast majority of contamination. There's then a buffer zone of 20 kilometres, which at the moment, civilians are recommended not to be in, and we don't do humanitarian demining in that space. But once you get out of those 25 kilometres, apart from specific geographic locations that are contaminated, the density of contamination is pretty low. There's been a recent study that says the Ukrainian economy is being affected to the tune of $11 billion a year by the perceived presence of mines, and may be a drag on GDP growth by as much as 4 or 5%. But I think that is just a small part of the problem, because when you look at it, the situation in Ukraine is almost like a hidden tax on the whole world, because of the conflict in Ukraine and the perceived problem of mines. We are maybe seeing fuel prices being higher than they need to be, certainly looking at food, particularly grain prices being higher than they need. And if you think if a loaf of bread is 10 cents a loaf higher than it needs to be, and you apply that across 6-7 billion people, every day you are starting to talk about an awful lot of money. So if we can find a way to remove that perception, which allows the markets to correct, and for those that artificial tax to be removed, we are going to save the world economy many, many millions, if not billions of dollars. The World Food Programme used to buy $4 billion of food a year from Ukraine, and that food, because of who was buying it, was going to the poorest people of the world. It was going into the Middle East, it was going into Africa, it was helping those food insecure countries around the world. WFP is still buying a lot of food from Ukraine, but it isn't able to buy the amount it was before, and obviously the reduction in production has raised the prices for food everywhere. So even if you could buy the food, it's now more expensive. So I think an investment in mine action in Ukraine today is an investment in the future growth of the world's economy. At the moment, about 15% of the workforce are women, but we're in the process of developing a project with UN Women, where we would like to bring between 200 and 500 women in the next 18 months into the sector, and ultimately aiming for 40 or 50% employment across the sector. Women are very good deminers, they're very good technicians, they've got great attention to detail. Mine action isn't as dangerous as people think. I mean, it's not the safest job in the world, but if you follow all the procedures, it is actually very safe. And we would like to see women working as team leaders, as bomb disposal technicians, as deminers, drivers, mechanics, doing the logistics, doing the accounts, helping plan operations, data analytics. So there's lots of opportunities to for Ukrainian women to join the sector, to support their families, and to help Ukraine rebuild. I think where the UN brings an added value in mine action is, we have over 30 years experience of working in mine action. We can bring those lessons learned from peacekeeping operations around the globe, special political missions, different humanitarian emergencies. The fact that we have seen deep buried bombs in Gaza, we've seen complex IEDs in an urban environment in Mosul, we've done large-scale route clearance in Sudan, agricultural clearance in Cambodia, large-scale humanitarian mine clearance in Afghanistan. So we bring that knowledge and experience. I've visited thousands of minefields in my career. I look at a minefield probably slightly different to somebody who's seen 10, 20, 50. So I think we bring that. We obviously bring the ability to mobilize resources. We can bring technical support. We can promote innovation. We are the custodians for international mine action standards, and so we can help Ukraine be as effective and efficient as possible, and that means solving the problem as quickly as we can. I mean, I think unfortunately, one of the real legacies of this war is going to be the number of survivors, the number of amputees that we're going to see, on the streets of Kyiv, Kharkiv, Mykolaiv over the years. What is perhaps unusual at the moment is that the vast majority of the casualties are young men, or men between 25 and 45. We're seeing multiple amputations. And the consequences are there's going to be an economic impact on this, there's going to be a social impact on this, and this is one of the areas I think Ukraine could become a real world leader. They've got amazing engineers and technology. They understand technology. It's a very digitized society. They're very innovative. They have fantastic metallurgists and engineers. So could Ukraine become a leader in prosthetics, robotic limbs, or even AI controlled limbs? How can we, if we're going to have 20,000 plus amputees who need to be supported over the next 40 or 50 years, how can we turn Ukraine into a world leader, a center of excellence in this area of supporting amputees, war victims, prosthetics, and take those young men who still have great minds and make them very productive in society. There was a pilot project run by UNDP recently where they took 20 amputees and taught them to be data analysts who are now working for some of the demining NGOs, helping identify areas that are dangerous and again, helping the efficiencies in the sector. We need to scale that up from 20 to 200 to 2,000. We need to be helping as many as possible. But the other thing I think we also need to be aware of is, there's another gender aspect to this, which is, women are going to be the primary people who will be looking after these young men who come back missing limbs, who've literally been torn apart. So how do we help the mothers, the wives, the sisters, the girlfriends, be prepared for what they're going to have to deal with when these men come home? Make sure that their apartments are ready for them. The kitchen is set up so they can make a sandwich if they want to. The bathroom set up so they can wash and clean themselves. That there are social support networks in place. That there are occupational therapists and physical therapists ready to help through the rehabilitation. That the psychological support, not just to the injured, but to the families of the injured. And so, I think this is going to create a new social dynamic, a new challenge that we have to look at and we need to be aware of today, because when it hits us tomorrow, it's going to be like a tsunami. Thank you.